Hello. So we have a new currency, and that's nice because you know, like they say in Aminata, the story goes, change is like rest, and it's nice to have something new. But is it something effective? Let's talk about it, right? So anyway, the CBK is issuing new notes, one shilling, sorry, new coins, 1 shilling coin, 5 shilling coin, 10 shilling coin, and 20 shilling coin. The gazettement was done today, and so they'll be accessible beginning today. The old ones will be phased out slowly as time goes, and so that's the general plan. For us back in the day, I don't know if you remember the 10 shilling note, right? So we're kind of like used to this phase out. For the young ones, it's really exciting. Okay, for everybody it's exciting, but for the young ones more so. So what will we have with these new coins? This is what we'll have. The 1 shilling will bear the image of a giraffe, the 5 shilling that of a rhino, the 10 shilling that of a lion, and the 20 shilling that of an elephant. So looking at these images, I was thinking the big five in Africa, right? Lion, leopard, rhino, elephant, and buffalo. So the buffalo is missing in these new currencies, and I'm thinking, why didn't they put the big five? Because it's like big for tourism and all of that, right? But the CBK says that it had to consider technical requirements to serve the public aspirations and capture the spirit of the constitution. So perhaps printing a giraffe was easier than a buffalo. I don't know. I know it might be easier than a leopard, but anyway, the big five wasn't there, but it's okay. So anyway, not to dwell on that much, because the main topic is below, is like what we'll be talking about. So why did we launch this new currency? Why did we feel the need to do so? So in the Article 231 of the Constitution, that's Article 231 of the Constitution, clause 4, I don't know if I should call it clause 4, or part 4, notes and coins issued by the CBK must bear the image or symbolize Kenya. They must bear the image of Kenya or symbolize something to do with Kenya, or an aspect of Kenya, but they should not bear the portrait of any individual. So that was the basic idea. Remove the individuals and only leave like some symbol of Kenya or something. So that's what they did, and that's why you see that the giraffe, indigenous to Africa, the rhino, right? The lion, it's like the pride of Africa, and the elephant is the lord of the jungle. So it's basically just screaming out Africa. And I'm hoping that the Chinese will see the rhino and the elephant, because the Chinese, they play around too much. So anyway, just wanted to give a bit of history about why we would feel that this would be necessary in the Constitution. Why did they feel that it should be necessary in the Constitution? So just to give a brief overview, the first nation to issue, let's say, a coin was Lydia, and they did that in 650 to 600 BC. And what they had was the image of an animal. It was specifically a lion, right? So the first coin to started off with the image of a lion, and then it progressed. Lydia is modern day Turkey, close to the Greeks, and so the Greeks adopted this thing, and what they did was they had images of gods. So you'd see the images of Greek gods on their coins, and some time later some people thought that they were gods, right? And so they started having images of people on their notes. And at first nobody would dare have their image on a coin, because it was reserved for the gods. It was so important. Everybody saw it. It had a powerful impact on the people that nobody had the guts to put their image there. But eventually people, there's always a start for everything. So the Archimedeans, for those who remember Persia, for those who know Persia, the Archimedeans were the first Persian empire. And Cyrus the Great, he's mentioned by the Jews in their accounts. You can read about him in the Bible. And this was the time that people started showing the images of people started having their images on coins. And if you remember, this time the Persians are the ones who are calling themselves the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That was a Persian phrase, right? And so these guys felt that they could have their coins on their heads on notes. So the African leaders, I think they borrowed from this. It got to their head, and they felt that, like, They were gods at that time, and they wanted their images there. They wanted everybody to see them there. They wanted that impact, that everybody would know their name and everybody would adore them, or give them respect, or fear them, right? And that kind of like had an impact in African society. Remember that African society, we didn't have these coins. We had cowrie shells. We used to exchange that, and food and all of those things. So when the coins came and they bear the image of the president, it had a really powerful impact on the African people. And so we thought that this impact should be curtailed, so that people do not view the presidents in a godlike status, right? That they view presidents as humans, that we reduce the powers that we ascribe to the presidency. And that's why we felt that we should remove these coins, these portraits. And that's what we did as Kenya. Article 231 of the Constitution. And that is what is happening right now. That's why we are getting rid of the coins and only putting symbols there. Back to what the Lydians used to do. They put the image of lions on their coins, right? So that's why we art as Africa back in the day. Okay, so does changing the image of a person change the society, or does it really change that mindset? It helps. I would say that it helps, because you're not reminded of that person every time you use that coin. But being reminded of a person is not that bad. If it's a person you respect, and if it's a person you cherish as a nation, the person who fought for you. Let me give an example, right? The US has the faces of presidents on their coins. The 1 cent penny has Abraham Lincoln, right? The guy who gave the Gettysburg speech, Abraham Lincoln, he's on the 1 cent penny. The 50 cent nickel in the US, it has the Thomas Jefferson, one of the architects of the US Constitution, President Thomas Jefferson, the guy who said that if a law becomes unjust, you have a duty to rebel against it. So that's the guy who's on the 5 cent nickel. Roosevelt, President Franklin Roosevelt, who is on the face of the 10 cent dime in the US. Now, Roosevelt had polio, and he was one of the instrumental guys who wanted to bring America into the war against Hitler. He wanted to do it quickly, but people are skeptical about it. And he worked well with Churchill, and he worked well with Stalin, even though everybody didn't. None of the two, Churchill and Roosevelt, liked Stalin. And he brought forth the New Deal and all of those things. And he's on the 10 cent dime. We have George Washington, the first president of the United States. That guy had wires in his teeth, right? He couldn't smile. People thought that he was angry. But he was able to lead his people to victory. Despite whatever he was facing, despite how angry he always looked at, people believed in him and they followed him. And he's on the 25 cent quarter in the US. So having an image of a person is not bad, depending on the person and what the person did, right? If the DRC has the image of Mobutu Sese Seko on its coin, how would that help the people when he plundered the whole country, right? If we have the image of Kenyatta, how would that help us when we know that the British left? And as one Mau Mau fighter put it, the British left, they did not live with the land. So how comes the Mau Mau did not get their land after the British left? So putting the image of him, does it help? Putting the image of Moi, we remember the detention centers, right? At Nyayo House, does it help? Again, Africans, we need to change a bit of our thinking, right? It's not the image of a person on a coin that's the problem. The image, the problem is the person you put on that coin, right? So we are taking all ourselves back to Lydia in 600 BC, where the people had animals as symbols, right? Whereas the whole world has moved, that they have changed, that when you see the image of a person, it's not necessarily of a god. It's a symbolic representation of what that person did. And when you don't have those symbolic representations around us, then we forget. And when we forget, history is bound to repeat itself. Isn't that what they said? But as I said again, this thing is good about for the nation, because change is like rest. At least we'll rest for a while. We won't talk about corruption and all the other bad things that are happening in Kenya. So that's the only positive things that comes about from this thing. We will rest for a while as they eat. So anyway, one of the other things that people were thinking about new currencies, another development that people are thinking that having new currencies, especially new notes, like the 1,000 bob note, that it will help the nation in terms of fighting corruption. And here's one guy, his name is Donald Kipkorir. He's a famous lawyer. He's famous on Twitter. And this is what he said. The CBK governor ought to invoke Section 22 of the Central Bank Act and retire all 5,000 and 1,000 shillings notes. And then holders of those notes to be given 1 week to return them to the CBK and then be issued with the new notes. Now, the thinking behind this was kind of like, let me give an example. I think Pablo Escobar was worth around billions. He was one of the richest guys in the world by the time he was at his peak. I think he was in the top 10 at his peak. And the US still got him, despite his wealth, right? The US still got him. Now, he used to hide cash in his house, as in millions and millions of stacks and of dollars. And you remember that the NYA case, they used to take cash, millions, and put it in gunny bags, gunias, and then they take them off, and I think they just hide them for a while, and then when it's safe, they circulate them in the economy. So the thinking is that these people with all that cash, they won't be able to do anything, because when they bring it, then we'll notice the currencies, the serial numbers, and then we'll arrest them. Just those are the thoughts, right? And that is what, like, Kwame Owino, he's an economist. He's the CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Economists, you should be part of that, right? And there's this theory that was tried in India, right, 2 years ago, and they tried this idea that when you replace one currency, let me use Kwame's words, the abolition of one currency in favor of another one would render most cash held by criminals unusable. So that's the idea. You render their cash unusable, because they can't bring them forward, because you'd notice the serial numbers, and they can't keep it to them, because now it's useless since we have a new currency. I'm hoping that you're getting that one. And Kwame explains the thinking of Kenyans, why we are proposing this kind of thing. And this is what he says. This tendency to throw any and all ideas into the ring, it's understandable. Why? Because you're tired of people stealing. So it's like, we have to do something. We have to do something. And Kwame continues, it is a reflection of the desperation of Kenyans. We are desperate because it's 5 billion at Afya Center. It's another 250 billion euro bond. And we're tired of these things. And we want an end to it. And so we are throwing all ideas into the ring. But Kwame warns, this idea may not be feasible. It doesn't mean that it works. And so we should be careful about it, right, as we approach it. Because why try something so, like what they did in India? It had a very big impact on that society. I think I'll touch on that. And then it comes to nothing, right? Why not focus on the right thing to do? So before we do that, we need to understand where the value in a currency comes from, right? So I'm hoping that I'll give you an understanding of where it comes from. So again, we talked about Cyrus the Great, the Achaemenid Empire, right? The first Persian Empire. And what happened was that during that time, they had silver bullions. Bullions, okay, bars, let's say just bars of gold, because we have ingots and then we have bullions and all of those things. And what they would do is that they would trade these bullions with other stuff, right? The weight and the purity of the bullion determined its value. This is a very important point. The weight and the purity of the bullion determined its value, right? That thing had inherent value within it. It was valuable on its own. Even if you don't sell it and you keep it in its house, it's still valuable. So in this case, even if we change, let's say, instead of using now silver, like this one, it was silver bullions, I think. Okay, Yeah, into silver bullions. So instead of now like the thinking that we have gold bullions now, so that the silver bullions would be useless, that would not happen if that was the case, because the silver bullion still had value even if you kept it in your house. I'm hoping that I hope that we understand. So anyway, so these guys had bullions, they did not have coins. The first guys who had coins were the Lydians. I'm hoping that you remember. And the Lydians had, what happened with the Lydians, 54% of it was gold and 44% of it was silver. So the Lydians, it had inherent value such that the coin had gold and silver within it, right? But what happened with the Lydians was that they used to change the, like this day it has too much gold, a lot of gold, the other day it has a lot of silver, so it became unstable, right? And the reason why we have currencies is to encourage stability, and so the Lydians could not develop their currencies. Again, I'm hoping that you're getting where I'm going. Unless you have stability in your currency, then you cannot develop it. It cannot become a powerful currency, and that's why the US currency is very powerful, because it's stable, right? But I'll go into that later. Okay, so anyway, here's what happened with the Lydian coins, right? They were too valuable. If you couldn't exchange a Lydian coin for a loaf of bread, because it would be like throwing away your coin, because that coin has gold and silver in it, and you're buying a loaf of bread with it. You cannot do that. You just keep your loaf of bread, unless you're buying an entire cart of loaf of bread, because they didn't have trucks, right? So even one coin was too valuable to exchange it for a loaf of bread, right? Yeah, so anyway, that's just a point. Another point was that Cyrus went over and conquered the Lydians, and what happened is that he now saw, see, those guys had bullions, now he saw that these guys have coins, so he developed that thing. And soon Lydia became one of the most powerful trading centers in the world, because it had a currency system, right? Cyrus was able now to stabilize the Lydian coin. He was able to develop it and spread it across his empire. And you can see the value of a stable currency, such that now you can exchange wealth very, very easily within the economy, because people have confidence in it. It has inherent value in it, right? Even if you keep that coin 1,000 years, even today, if you unearth that coin, it still has gold, and you can still sell that gold, right? So that was this is what we used to call commodity money. For those who did economics, this is commodity money, right? Such that the whatever you're exchanging, it has money in itself. I don't know if it's commodity, but anyway, the idea was that it has value in itself, right? Let's go to the gold standard. What the gold standard had was that it gave value in terms of you take the coin, that gold would sit pretty in a bank. It would sit in the bank, right? And you guys would have notes and coins, but those notes and coins would represent a certain amount of gold in the bank. You get? So such that if you had a note worth 10 bob, right, it would represent 10 pounds of gold in the bank, or something like that. I'm just trying to give it an overview. So later, gold, it shifts, like the price, it's relatively stable, but it shifts. So in the gold standard, they had to develop a fixed price, and as people would know, fixed prices, they have their problems. And then came to the notes. You'd actually be able to exchange your note for some gold in the bank. So in Kenya, you can't do that. You can't go to the CBK and tell them, I have this amount of cash, give me this amount of gold, right? Because it's not the amount that is printed on that note, on that coin. It's not equivalent to some value of gold that it's in the bank or silver, right? So that was the gold standard, and it ended in the British Empire after the outbreak of World War I. How did it end? The Bank of England went to the people and appealed to them. You know what, guys? Don't redeem your paper money for gold. Don't redeem your paper money for gold. And that would give you an idea of the influence that government has on the people. Because it asked them, let's be patriots. Let's not redeem our paper money for gold. And that's how they brought about the gold standard. But then Britain went back to the gold standard. And the idea of fixing rates, it came. And it brought a bit of problems, because Churchill fixed the rate at $4.86. equivalent of pounds. So anyway, it led to a depression, unemployment, and a strike. It's called the 1926 general strike. So the gold standard had its problems because you had to fix prices, right? And then when people came and redeemed all their gold, then you'd have no gold in your in the central bank. Let's say now like the Bank of England. So what would you have if you don't have that, right? As a country, you cannot be empty. You cannot have your gold empty gold, like your reserves empty of gold, right? Anyway, I'm hoping that you're getting the point. So anyway, even when the gold standard ended, the US still has a lot of gold. Fort Knox, just one fort, it has 2.3% of all the gold ever refined in the world. 2.3% of all the gold ever refined in the world is at Fort Knox in the United States of America. Something to think about. India was also buying a lot of gold some time back, and so was China. So even though the gold standard ended, some countries understand that you need to have something that's of constant value near you at some point, right? Kenya, what are we doing? Anyway, Kenya is Kenya. So anyway, there's fiat money. That's what we are using today. Fiat money is basically that money, like the Lydians, right? It had 54% gold and the other percentage of silver, right? In Kenya, we don't have that one, right? Because there is no inherent value in that note. It only has value because the government tells us that we have value, and because we believe the government. That's the only reason that it has value. So that's why you hear people saying that it's a matter of trust and a matter of confidence in a currency. Okay, so I'm hoping that you understand where value is coming from, right? Because okay, I'll explain later. So just to use the 1 shilling coin, right? It has 5.5 grams, right? It's made of mostly copper-plated steel, and I did some research. Copper-plated steel, copper-plated steel. So I focused on steel. 1,000 grams of steel is 70 bob. 1 gram of steel is 0.07 bob, right? 1 gram of steel is 0.075 bob. So 5.5 grams of steel is 0.385 bob, right? And the value on that coin is 1 shilling, right? But the cost of that coin is 0.385 bob. And if you add now the copper that's plated above it, it can come to 0.5 bob. So you can see that the value printed on it and the inherent value of it are different. It has less value, right? So anyway, that's what we use fiat money. Now, will changing currencies help in the fight against corruption? It will not help. You see, we only have confidence in the government because the government is telling us about what is happening in the economy. Like this person is producing this person is producing that person is producing that. So at the end of the day, we have an idea of the total output, of the total production that we have in an economy. And you trust the government when you tell us that everybody is producing, because we can't verify it on our own. The money that we have in our economy, it represents the value of production, like what people are producing. And when you don't let me give that example. Like the money that is stolen, even if it's kept away, it represents some value that was produced. You can't just replace that value by printing more coins, because for that value, it's our taxes that was stolen and put around, hidden somewhere. Somebody worked hard to produce that money to give the government, right? He or she worked, right? You cannot replace that work by printing cash, right? You just can't print it, because printing, there's no amount of work done to do that. So even if you print coins and notes, new ones, it won't help in terms of bringing now value to the economy. That value still remain hidden somewhere, and it needs to be it needs to be shown. It needs to be brought out into the light, and eventually you can't keep hiding it. It can't be a continuous kind of thing that what you do, just print new currencies, print new currencies, print new currencies, because at the end of the day people lose confidence in our currency. And when they lose confidence, then it will, like what's happening in Venezuela. I think they are printing new currencies. People will refuse to accept it. In Zimbabwe, they are trying to use foreign currency to buy goods and services, right? So people will have no faith in our currency. So it's not a long-term measure, and it does not. One of the principal ideas of money is to have value, and it does not. Fiat money does not have inherent value, so that the government is the only person that tells us it has value, and we only believe the government because we actually see what's happening, right? That it wouldn't lie to us, but at the end of the day, that confidence can be shaken. It can be shaken, and yeah, we cannot replace that value, right, by printing new notes and coins. It won't replace the value that's taken from us, the hard work that people put into producing it and all of those things. I'm not sure if I explained it well, but I hope that I have explained it well. Just to continue and just to finish, right? Kwame says, from the demonetization that happened in India, the thing that people are using as an example, the CPK, this is what Kwame says. To its credit, the CBK has not made this preposterous argument. That this argument to Kwame is preposterous, and to me also. And the CBK is not making that argument. Other people outside of the CBK are making that argument. And mostly it's because they don't understand economics. And it may be because, this is Kwame explaining why the CBK is not making this argument, expanded understanding, right, that the demonetization program in India had advanced consequences. It brought problems, like bringing a new currency to take away the old so that you can arrest criminals. It brought advanced consequences, and it nearly shaved off nearly 1% from the annual growth in India. So 1%. Now, 1% is a big deal, because like Trump, what he's fighting for right now is just to increase the US growth rate. Like he brought it from 1.8% to 3%, and I think it will go to 4%. That was a big deal, right? Because it's billions and billions into the economy, right? India shaved off nearly 1%. It's one of the largest economies in the world. That's a big deal, right? And as I said, when there's some value that's hidden, some production that remains unrevealed, somebody took it away and now hid it. You cannot print something to hide, to replace that value that was created. You cannot print it. You cannot replace the work that somebody put into to give you taxes. If it comes back into the economy, let's say if they inject it through, let's say, projects like the church and everything, then you might say that it's circulated into the economy. But when it remains hidden, and then now you print new coins, it doesn't replace the value that somebody put into creating that initial thing. So that's the idea. When you don't have inherent value, then the government tells us that it has value, and we only believe the government because the government is the only thing that can see everything that's happening in the economy, all the work that people are doing. And the government cannot replace this work by printing new notes and coins, because we'd feel it. Somehow you'd feel it. And that will lead to inflation and all the other things. People will stop trusting in our currency. And in the end, yeah, we'll just stop using it, like Zimbabwe has stopped using its currency. So anyway, monetary economics. This is monetary economics. I did it, I think, in second year or third year in campus. So I hope that my explanations have helped. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you tomorrow, right? Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.